Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're digging into a pretty specific set of source materials.
Yeah, it's all centered around, well, someone you hear about constantly, Elon Musk.
Right. And our main source for this dive, it's an excerpt from a video transcript, MeidasTouch on YouTube.
That's the one. And it offers a very, let's say, sharp critique of Musk. Very intense.
So our goal here isn't really to say if the source is right or wrong.
No, definitely not.
It's more about unpacking what this source is actually saying.
Yeah.
Understanding their specific points, the claims they make about controversies, his actions.
And what this source sees as the bigger picture, the implications.
Exactly. We're just trying to lay out what's in this material so you can see the arguments and claims being presented from this particular viewpoint.
Okay, let's get into it. Where does the source start?
Well, it kicks off by quoting Musk. He's talking about how recent events affected Tesla.
Right, and whether he took things personally.
And the source says he confirmed, yeah, he did take it personally.
And then the source quotes him making some really serious claims, talking about massive violence against his companies.
Yeah, specifically mentions bullets into showrooms and burning down cars, that kind of thing.
And also, massive violence threatened against me, according to the source's quote of him.
In his take on the people involved, the source quotes him saying they're on the wrong side of history.
He calls it an evil thing to do.
And predicts, according to the source, that a number of them are going to prison and they deserve it.
He apparently also included the people that funded them and organized them in that prediction about prison.
Now, the source's reaction to that is immediate and pretty strong.
Yeah, they jump right in, calling it unbelievable hubris.
And absolutely no accountability for his horrid actions. That's the source's phrasing.
They even label him a narcissistic sociopath right there.
And that kind of strong language about his character, well, it continues throughout the source material we looked at.
Oh, definitely. The source uses some really extreme, almost clinical-sounding terms.
Like what?
Well, they state they never bought the idea he's autistic. Instead, they suggest he's a stone-cold psychopath devoid of empathy.
Wow.
And a cold, power-hungry sadist, even almost cartoonishly evil. They mention a villainous laugh.
So a very, very negative portrayal in this source.
Extremely. And it leads to this huge claim they make, that his actions from their perspective have directly hurt and or killed millions.
Millions of people.
That's the claim in the source. And that ties directly into one of the main points they focus on.
Right.
The whole controversy around USAID funding.
Right. USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, handles foreign aid.
Exactly. And the source claims that what they call Musk's gutting of USAID is already resulting in thousands of deaths in Africa.
Already thousands.
That's what the source alleges. And it goes further, citing estimates that these actions will ultimately kill millions of people.
How?
Through starvation or lack of medical care that USAID used to provide. That's the connection the source makes.
And they bring in Bill Gates on this point, right?
Yeah. Yes, extensively. They quote Gates directly, saying, "The picture of the world's richest man killing the world's poorest children is not a pretty one." A very stark quote, reported by the source.
And the source includes a specific example Gates apparently gave.
It does. Reportedly about Musk canceling grants to a hospital in Gaza province, Mozambique.
Okay.
And this hospital, the source says, its work was preventing mothers from transmitting HIV to their babies.
And why would he cancel that, according to the source citing Gates?
The source claims it was based on a mistaken belief that the U.S. was supplying condoms to Hamas in Gaza in the Middle East. A complete mix-up, apparently.
That's quite an allegation reported there.
It is, and the source continues quoting Gates, saying he wished Musk would visit the children now affected. "I'd love for him to go in and meet the children that have now been infected with HIV because he cut that money."
The source also mentions Gates' plans to increase his own global health spending.
Yes, stepped it up significantly, according to the report.
And there was more from Gates in the source about the impact on USAID itself.
Yeah, the source quotes Gates describing the staff as feeling like they were put in the wood chipper.
Oof.
And expressing concern that child mortality might actually increase for the first time in 25 years.
Leading to how many potential deaths?
The source cites Gates mentioning the possibility of over 1 million additional deaths.
And a source links this back to
DOD and, of course, Elon Musk, partly. That's the direct connection the source makes. A very serious charge.
It really highlights how intensely this source views the alleged consequences. Okay, so moving from USAID, the source also gets into potential conflicts of interest.
Right. related to his government contracts and his advisory roles.
And the source does include Musk's defense on this.
It does. Quotes him saying he's simply an advisor, that he doesn't have formal power.
The president can take or leave his advice, basically.
And he claims, according to the source, that any improperly awarded contract would be front-page news.
He also apparently argued that advisors having economic interests isn't new.
Yeah, that many advisors throughout history have had them.
But the source obviously pushes back. How?
They call his situation unique and unprecedented.
Why unique?
Because, the source argues, he holds billions in federal contracts, mostly SpaceX,
Okay.
while also having insider's knowledge from advising the DoD, the Department of Defense. That combination is what the source flags.
Does the source give a concrete example of what they see as a conflict?
Yes. It mentions Starlink allegedly pushed out Verizon at the FAA.
The Federal Aviation Administration.
Correct. Even though the source reports Verizon had a contract there since 2023.
And the source's label for this.
Blatant conflict of interest and double dealing on Musk's part. Pretty direct.
So this source clearly sees a major issue there. Okay, then the source pivots to another controversy. Something about South Africa.
Yeah, involving South Africa's equity laws.
Maybe give us a little context on those laws first, as the source likely assumes its audience knows.
Sure. Basically, post-apartheid, South Africa enacted laws aimed at correcting the massive economic imbalances left behind, trying to boost economic participation for the Black majority population who were systematically disadvantaged.
Okay, so aiming for greater economic equality.
Got it. So the source details this exchange where Musk is quoted calling these laws, well, improper and racist.
He used the word racist.
According to the source, yes. He argued Nelson Mandela wanted all races should be on equal footing, but now there are, he claims, 140 laws giving strong preference to Black South Africans.
Leading to what situation for him, according to the source?
He reportedly described it as absurd, saying he cannot get a license to operate in Starlink because I'm not Black, despite being born there.
How does the source frame the interviewer's part in this?
The source notes the interviewer pointed out the law's aim was economic equality and then suggested, it looks like the government has found a way around those rules for you, Musk.
And Musk's response to being asked if that seemed right.
The source quotes him saying, not for me to answer.
And the source's take on that whole exchange.
Again, very harsh. Calls Musk a jerk.
Specifically?
Claims he's demeaning this woman, showing a hateful way of treating people he thinks are beneath him, particularly women.
And they circle back to the context of the laws.
Yes, emphasizing they're about rectifying apartheid's legacy for the Black majority.
And the source's final interpretation of the outcome.
That it looks like Elon's going to get around these equity laws because he's, what, a very rich white man. That's the source's conclusion on that specific point.
So framed very much through a lens of power, race, and history by this source. Oh, what about the part where they discuss him being a divisive figure?
Right. The source brings up an exchange about whether his actions were worth it.
And Musk's response, according to the source.
He's quoted blaming legacy media propaganda for making people believe things that aren't true.
And he gave an example.
Yes. The claim that he is a Nazi.
How did he explain that claim arising, according to the source?
The source quotes him attributing it to some random hand gesture at a rally. He apparently said he only meant my heart goes out to you.
Okay, now the source's reaction to that explanation is, well, it's something else.
It's incredibly aggressive and offensive. The source uses extremely vulgar language we won't repeat, but directly calls him, in their words, a fucking Nazi.
And disputes his explanation of the gesture.
Completely. Says it was no random hand gesture, claims he did it twice.
And they cite others.
Yeah, claims every authoritarian scholar and historian called it a Nazi salute. The source also counters his point about media bias, arguing legacy media usually pushes a fascist right-wing corporate narrative.
So a total rejection of his framing and a very inflammatory counter-accusation from the source.
Exactly. Then the source tries to sort of sum up what it sees as the results of Musk's time connected to the White House.
Okay, what kind of outcomes does the source allege?
A whole list. Claims he shoved through billions of dollars in government contracts in huge conflicts of interest.
We touched on that. What else?
Claims he escaped multiple investigations into his companies for violating safety regulations and rules. Also that he fired thousands of federal employees.
And data collection.
Yeah. Alleges he collected millions of pieces of data on all of us.
Did the source address the idea that maybe some of this was about saving money?
It did, but argued the opposite. claims he did not save taxpayer money.
Why not?
Because, the source argues, his austerity cuts resulted in chaos, which meant agencies had to rehire people and end up spending ultimately more money.
So the source's bottom line on his impact there.
That the U.S. is less safe and less secure because of Trump and Elon Musk.
They cite examples.
Briefly mentions alleged issues at the NIH National Institutes of Health and problems with air traffic control at Newark Airport as examples supporting that claim.
This all seems to feed into a larger theme in the source about wealth and greed.
Absolutely. That's a major undercurrent. The source talks about the repulsive greed of Elon Musk and the Trumpian billionaire cult class.
And connects it to policy.
Yeah, claims Republicans passed a bill driving the poorest into deeper poverty by raising their taxes and taking away their health care and food assistance. Calls it next-level type of cruelty.
And this is where the Bill Gates comparison comes back in.
Exactly. The source contrasts this by highlighting Gates's plan to give away 99% of his wealth, the billions already given through philanthropy.
Right.
And quotes a report suggesting Gates and his ex-wife would have been the world's first trillionaires if they hadn't done all that philanthropy and stock selling.
So the source presents that as the alternative model.
Precisely. A stark contrast, they say, to the gross greed we see now from Musk, Trump, Bezos, Zuckerberg, others.
Who the source claims are doing what?
Just hoarding the bulk of the world's wealth while people are literally starving and dying because of lack of access to basic needs. That's the source's very strong claim.
And the source ends its commentary on Musk with, well, another very harsh remark.
Yes, a final, extremely crude and demeaning personal insult directed at him. Uses language we're definitely not repeating, but it sums up the source's ultimate contempt.
Okay. Wow.
Ah.
We've definitely gone deep into this one source's perspective.
For sure. We've covered its claims about violence, the alleged impact of funding cuts, those conflict of interest arguments, the South Africa controversy, the back and forth on the Nazi label, character critiques, wealth disparity. It's a lot.
And what really jumps out is just how intense the criticism is, right? And the very specific, sometimes shocking examples the source uses to back up its points.
Absolutely. This dive into just this one source really paints a clear picture of a particular, very critical narrative and the claims being made within it.
So what does this mean for you listening to all this?
Well, it really highlights how complex and, frankly, how differently powerful figures can be portrayed. You see how one source can present such dramatic claims about the impact of someone's actions.
And maybe the takeaway is about how you engage with this kind of material. Focusing on the specific details, the concrete claims the source is making like we just did.
Yeah, like the specific hospital in Mozambique or the FAA contract allegation.
Understanding those helps you understand the basis of the source's overall viewpoint, even when, the narratives out there are really contradictory.
So maybe something to think about is this. How does zeroing in on those specific examples and claims within a source, rather than just reacting to the big, bold headline or the final judgment, change how you evaluate a controversial figure or a complex event? How does it help you navigate these really charged discussions?